Hello, my name is Gerald Spence. I'm the Deputy Registrar for CARTA, and this is the mandatory continuing competency activity for the 2022 renewal. We're going to look at your obligations as a regulated professional in Alberta, and we're also going to look at the mechanics of the renewal form. The first thing we're going to look at is what the respiratory therapist professional regulation says. So the renewal section requirements are outlined in section 11. The first thing we need is evidence that you've met the continuing competence requirements set out in this regulation. The second thing we're going to need is a written statement as to whether or not you've pled guilty or been found guilty of a criminal offence in Canada or an offence of a similar nature in a jurisdiction outside of Canada. Thirdly, we need a written statement as to whether or not you've been the subject of any disciplinary action by a regulatory organization in Alberta or elsewhere. And last, we need to see proof of evidence of having the type and amount of professional liability insurance required by the Council. So let's dig a little deeper into the requirements under Section 11. The first we're going to look at is continuing competency. As part of this program, we need to ensure that you have done a minimum of 48 educational credit hours in the 2-year period preceding this renewal. The second part is, have you worked a minimum of 1,500 practice hours in the 4-year period preceding this renewal? The next thing Section 11 requires is a written statement as to whether or not you have pled guilty or been found guilty of a criminal offence in Canada or an offence of a similar nature in a jurisdiction outside of Canada. We do this by answering questions. We have 4 questions, and if you answer yes to any of these 4 questions, you need to call the registrar. Question number 1. Since your application or last registration renewal, have you been found guilty of a criminal offence in Canada? The answer is yes or no. If the answer is yes, you have to call the registrar and get more information. Question number 2. Since your application, have you been found guilty of an offence under the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act or Food and Drug Act of Canada? Again, if you answer yes to this question, you have to call the registrar. Now we look at whether or not you've been the subject of a disciplinary action by a regulatory organization in Alberta or elsewhere. And we do that with questions 3 and 4. Question 3, since your application or last registration renewal, have you been disciplined, suspended, required to resign, terminated, or subjected to similar action in respect to employment or contract of service? If the answer is yes, contact the CARTA office. Question number 4. Since your application or last registration renewal, have you been the subject of any professional misconduct, incompetence, or incapacity, or other similar proceeding, finding, or investigation by any professional licensing or registration body other than CARTA? And finally, we look at the insurance coverage that you have. Do you have evidence of having the type and amount of professional liability insurance as required by the Council? We do that just by asking the question, do you certify that you're covered by personal/employer professional liability insurance in the amounts and coverage as established in the CARTA Council approved professional liability insurance policy? This is a minimum of $2 million. Next, we look at notification consent and an attestation. There's a box you have to click here that says you clearly understand that making a false declaration or misleading statement on this application may be considered unprofessional conduct as defined by the Health Professions Act. I'm also giving my consent to receive all correspondence from CARTA electronically. So you have to check this box prior to starting your renewal. When you click here, you're confirming that all the information you report on this renewal is not only true, it's accurate. and you're also agreeing to receive correspondence from the college electronically. Should you choose not to receive correspondence from the college electronically, we have a paper application that you can use, but it does take much longer to process. Next, we'll look at what the Health Professions Act says about renewal. So this is in section 33, and the registrar must enter the following information for each regulated member in the appropriate category of register. And you can see we require your name, your registration number, whether or not your registration is restricted to a period of time, any conditions on your practice permit, the status of your practice permit. Are you provisional? Are you active? The member's practice specialization. Well, we don't have that in our college. Whether the member is authorized to provide a restricted activity not normally provided by the regulated members of the college. For instance, giving blood or blood products. Whether the member is not authorized to provide a restricted activity that is normally provided by regulated members of the college. For instance, you could be restricted from ventilating patients, and the information described in section 119.1. Section 33 of the HPA also requires regulated members to give us their demographic status, education, training, and experience, and their practice in the regulated professions. We can look at the membership renewal now. So if you go to the members only page, you'll see a start membership renewal button. Starting the process is done by clicking that green button. Next, you're going to have to read about the payment options for membership renewal. There's 3 options this year: a credit card, MasterCard or Visa, e-transfer, or a monthly payment program. Once you've read and understood your options, you can press the Start Your Membership Renewal button at the bottom and you're off to the races. Step 1 is your basic information. So if you are renewing, these fields should be pre-populated. Check to see if there's errors. You can make changes to your name at this time if you've gotten married or you've legally changed your name. If you need to adjust your gender or your birth date or training school, please call the CARTA office. Use the green Next button to progress to Step 2. Step 2 collects more personal information. You need to fill out each field carefully, ensuring there are no errors. Proper names must be capitalized, things must be spelled correctly. You can make changes to your personal information at this time if you've moved. Your email address should be confirmed by typing it in twice, and your mailing address should allow us to send you a letter and it would get there intact. You can give us your mobile phone number as your home phone if you don't have a landline. And we need emergency contact information with a name and a phone number. When you're done this, click the green Next button to progress to Step 3 or the back to revert to Step 2. Step 3 is all about employer and work information. You start by clicking the Add an Employer button if you have a job, and you need to open a page and enter your information. We'll show that later. If you're unemployed, you do not need to use the Add an Employer button. As you can see, we've opened up the employer information page. It's important, as always, to fill out each field carefully. Proper names should be capitalized. If you're using a phone, make sure you're selecting uppercase where it needs to be uppercase. Your manager's name and email must be accurate, as they will be sent an email indicating that you have renewed. It's really important to spell your manager's name correctly. Your employer address should be where you work, not the corporate office. For example, if you work at the University of Alberta Hospital, you would type in AHS for Alberta Health Services - University of Alberta. If you work up in Grand Prairie, you would type in AHS QE2 Hospital. If you work in the private sector, put the company name down and then the city or location where you work. Click the Save button. You can add up to 3 employers. One issue that many people renewing have is they don't see the Save button at the bottom of the page. And they move on to the next page without saving this information, and then they appear to be unemployed. To see that Save button on a laptop or tablet, hold the Control and minus key down and keep on striking the minus key until the Save button appears at the bottom of the page. Click Save. You can reset the screen to its previous settings by holding down the Control and hitting the plus key till the fonts return to their original size. The next thing we need to do is enter our continuing competency hours. We can find information about continuing competency in the members section in the FAQ or download the continuing competency information and self-assessment package. Enter your continuing competency hours. Always enter a whole number as the system will not accept decimals. Always round up. The next step we have to do is put in our practice hours. We need to calculate our practice hours for the period of April 1st, 2021 to March 31st, 2022. Practice hours do not include vacation, stat holidays, personal days, or sick time, but do include overtime. Take a look at the sample calculation. Someone working full-time with 4 weeks of vacation who took all their stats and no sick leave plus no overtime would work around 1,775 hours. When people put in 2015 or 2020, they are grossly overestimating their practice hours. Once you put in your practice hours, again a whole number, use the next button to go to step 4 or back to revert to step 3. Some members perform restricted activities that only can be done with special authorization by the registrar. If you perform one of these 5 restricted activities, you must contact the registrar and they will update your file. We would continue to collect information. The first thing you would do is choose your primary area or areas of practice. If there's another, you can type it in here. The second is you would select all the languages you speak. The third, you would identify any other jurisdictions where you hold a respiratory therapist practice permit. And the last thing you would do is if you had 2 professions, say you were a paramedic and an RT, you would click the appropriate button. Finally, you would use the green next button to progress to step 5 or the back button to revert to step 3. Step 5 is where you confirm the information that you've entered. You review the information and ensure it's correct. If it's not correct, use the back keys to move to the page where the correction or corrections need to be made. Remember, you clicked on a box that said you clearly understand making a false declaration or a misleading statement on this application may be considered professional conduct. So this is where we can make sure we get everything right, and often people just jump over this step to go to the payment portal and they end up having to redo things or have been selected for an audit because the information showed they worked 1,500 hours but they were unemployed. So this is a very important step. Don't overlook it. We're almost done. Step 6 is how we pay for our renewal. The 3 choices you have this year are credit card, we accept Visa or MasterCard only, e-transfer, or the CSRT monthly payment options. Fill out the information carefully. Don't transpose a number. Put in the correct CVV number. Sometimes we have issues with credit cards. Try again at a later date, and often it will work. It is important to note that if you choose e-transfer or the CSRT monthly payment option, an electronic copy of your permit in PDF form will not be sent to you immediately. The e-transfer, you'll be able to download it from the webpage after we confirm the e-transfer was deposited into our account. And the CSRT option, when the CSRT sends us an email list of the people who selected it, then you will be able to download a PDF copy of your permit. Thank you for your patience. Please try your best to give us your most accurate information with the least amount of typos. The quality of this data will help us move into a new era of legislation and move away from self-regulation towards co-regulation. Thank you again.